I'm Liz Faublis, and this is Currents. The majesty of the Catholic Church grows with 7 new members of the community of saints. The race for president gets all the headlines, but New York will also choose a U.S. senator. Tonight, a candidate. She's Catholic and outspoken. And bringing our faith to the world is the work of missionaries. Tonight, we meet the people of Brooklyn who help. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. The Catholic Church is richer 7 times over now that Pope Benedict has canonized 4 women and 3 men as saints. 80,000 people jammed St. Peter's Square yesterday, many in feathered headdresses to celebrate Kateri Tekakwitha, and others wearing flowered leis to honor Marianne Cope. The Holy Father led the procession into the square. Above, 7 large banners representing each of the saints. In addition to Kateri and Marianne Cope, the other new saints are 2 martyrs, Jacques Bathieu, martyred in Madagascar, and Pedro Calingzad, killed in Guam. 2 dedicated to education, Carmen Salles, a pioneer in women's education, and Giovanni Battista, who taught marginalized youngsters marketable trades. And Anne Schaefer, though sick and bedridden most of her life, and composed words and letters that inspired people everywhere. The Holy Father praised each of the 7 as heroic examples for the entire church. He said Marianne Cope is a shining model for Catholics, and Kateri, the first Native American saint from the U.S., is an inspiration to indigenous people across North America.
Kateri Tekakwitha was born into this New York State in 1656 to Mohawk father, the Christian Algonquin mother, who gave to her a sense of the living God. Leading a simple life, Kateri remained faithful to her love for Jesus, to prayer, and to daily Mass. Her greatest wish was to know and to do what pleased God. I now turn to Marianne Cope. Mother Marianne willingly embraced the call to care for the lepers of Hawaii after many others had refused. There she looked after Father Damien, already famous for his heroic work among the lepers, nursed him as he died, and took over his work among male lepers. At a time when little could be done for this suffering from this terrible disease, Marianne Cope showed the highest love, courage, and enthusiasm. She's a shining and energetic example of the best of the tradition of Catholic nursing sisters.
Now, although St. Marianne did most of her holy work in Hawaii, she was raised in Syracuse, New York. In fact, of the 10 Americans who are saints, 7 have New York roots. After the canonizations were complete, the Pope turned his attention to Lourdes in France. Severe flooding has forced the evacuation of more than 400 Catholic pilgrims who had come to Lourdes to visit the grotto where the Virgin Mary appeared to St. Bernadette in 1858. The local river, swollen by rain, overran its banks, threatening the town's hotels. The Holy Father asked the Queen of all Saints, Mary, to intercede. Lourdes is best known for its healing waters at the grotto, but several feet of floodwaters have forced the closing of the grotto and other shrines in Lourdes. Only the basilica, which is on higher ground, remains accessible. No injuries have been reported. The Vatican is condemning the car bombing in Beirut that killed a top Lebanese general, calling it a, quote, horrible act that could further spread violence in that region. The bombing has increased fear that the Syrian civil war is coming to Lebanon. At the general's funeral, clashes erupted between Lebanese. 2 more people were killed. Lebanon Sunnis back the rebels in Syria, while Lebanese Shiites support the Syrian government of Bashir Assad. The murdered general was fighting against Syrian attempts to infiltrate Lebanon. Politicians are blaming Assad for Friday's bombing that killed the military man and 7 other Lebanese. And in the Christian section of Damascus, at least 10 people are dead after another car bombing on Sunday outside a police station. The blast was described as powerful. No claims of responsibility so far. 17 people were wounded. The bombing coincided with the meeting in Damascus between Assad and UN Special Envoy Lakhdar Brahim. The envoy is trying to broker a ceasefire between Syrian rebels and Assad's government forces ahead of a Muslim holiday on Friday. Former UN Secretary Kofi Annan had previously tried several times to win a ceasefire, but without success. 30,000 people have been killed in the civil war since March of last year. Meantime, the Bishop of Aleppo in Syria says his city is devastated by the war and Christians are leaving in large numbers. The bishop fears the Christian population in Syria is being reduced to a, quote, token few, which would be a catastrophe since the bishop says Christians of Syria are direct successors to the apostles Paul and Barnabas. In our country, foreign policy is the only topic in tonight's final presidential debate. Mitt Romney is in Boca Raton, Florida, the site of the debate. He's seen here after he attended church yesterday. The president, meanwhile, prepared at Camp David. While economic issues are likely to be the top issues for most voters on November 6th, CNN's Sandra Endo reports events overseas are critical.
The economy is still the top issue for voters, but with troops still in Afghanistan, unrest in the Middle East, and concern about Iran gaining nuclear weapons capability, foreign policy matters to Americans.
People want to know that they have a strong, steady hand in the Oval Office, and they don't want someone who's reckless and who's been consistently wrong on foreign policy issues, as Governor Romney has.
Mitt Romney's supporters say the Obama administration is weak on foreign affairs, as demonstrated most recently in its ever-changing explanation of what led to the September 11th attack on the U.S. consulate in Libya and the lack of security there.
If we can't figure out what went on in a relatively open city in a country we had helped liberate, why do we think we know what's going on with the Iranian nuclear program? And I think you can go country by country and see sort of the fraying at the edges of the Obama policy.
Romney says he will offer more support to anti-regime forces in Syria and will take a tougher stance against China.
Day one, I will label China a currency manipulator.
President Obama will likely remind voters that he ordered the raid in which al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden was killed, ended the war in Iraq, and has begun pulling troops out of Afghanistan.
It is time to make sure that we're doing some nation building here at home.
Sandra Endo of CNN reporting there. Now, this is the last of the 2012 debates. The other night at the Al Smith dinner in New York, President Obama wondered about what might be a big question for many.
I'm hoping that Governor Romney and I will have a chance to answer the question that is on the minds of millions of Americans watching at home. Is this happening again? Why aren't they putting on The Voice?
The debate begins at 9 p.m. tonight. Up next, new controversy about New York's abortion clinics. That and more news as Currents continues. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Fabulous. Last month, a medical clinic in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, stopped offering abortions after more than 20 years of prayers outside its doors. Now, the Speaker of the City Council, Christine Quinn, is reacting, and she's calling for a City Council clinic protection program with people escorting women to the abortion clinics. Monsignor Philip Riley, founder of Helpers of God's Precious Infants, which prays and counsels on sidewalks outside abortion clinics, says government should not be taking sides on the controversial issue. Meanwhile, the head of the pro-life group Operation Rescue says what Quinn is doing amounts to vigilantism. Quinn says no taxpayer money would be used for the escorts. She did not explain how that would work. Now, the only presidential candidate to run for the White House with 2 Catholic running mates has died. George McGovern ran as the Democratic nominee in 1972. Originally, he selected Thomas Eagleton, a Catholic, as his vice president. Eagleton withdrew from the race following reports he suffered from depression. He was replaced on the ticket by Sergeant Shriver, also a Catholic. Richard Nixon won the election in a landslide. George McGovern died over the weekend. He was 90 years old. Wendy Long is a Catholic, and she's also the Republican and Conservative Party's candidate for one of New York's seats in the U.S. Senate. Recently, she came to our studios. I sat down with her for an in-depth look at her candidacy and the race. Welcome to the program. It is so nice to meet you.
Thank you, Liz.
I want to start first by lifting the veil. We've talked about this at length ahead of the interview. You're down in the polls. according to the New York Times, it's because people are not familiar with you. You're not a very well-known candidate. So let's change that. Let's change that today. Tell us about Wendy Long, and tell us why your platform and who you are would encourage voters to vote for you come November.
Sure. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here, Liz. I'm an ordinary citizen who's had some great jobs. I've been a working woman all my professional life since getting out of college, and now I'm a mother. I was a working mother for many years, and I've been a full-time mother the last few years. I live in New York City, and I've been involved in American government. I love our Constitution, love our country, and I've had a great opportunity to work in Washington before, but I've never run for elective office. But what really made me step forward to run this year was I felt like in 2012, we're at a turning point in this country, and a lot of things are on the line. You know, the level of our national debt, the crisis that's facing our economy, the unemployment crisis, the standing of America around the world and the rise of terrorism. So many things, and frankly, just our culture, the degradation of our culture and what's happening to religious freedom. All these things concern me, and I felt like the America that I grew up in is kind of slipping away from us. And so I stepped up to run as the first-time candidate, never run for anything before, because I think really what's wrong with our government is we have this professional class of politicians who are mainly concerned with keeping their own jobs, aren't so much concerned with other people's jobs or with our liberties and our Constitution and our national security. And so I decided to step into the fray.
All right, you hit a lot of very interesting points there, a lot on the line, and you also spoke about religious freedom. As you know, the bishops of the Catholic Church, they've outlined 5 topics of priority to the Catholic Church. Now that's the easy part. You know where they stand. You're a practicing Catholic. Let's address a few key points. I want to start first with the most notable, the HHS mandate. Now, you have said that you stand with Cardinal Dolan and all people of faith in opposition to the rule. You've also added that your opponent, Senator Gillibrand, as well as President Obama, they're trying to reduce our freedom of religion to just another activity that can be regulated by the federal government. Is that where the issue stands with you, simply one of religious freedom?
Absolutely. My opponent, Senator Gillibrand, really, I think, is misleading the public about this. She stands there and says, I can't believe we're debating the access of women to birth control. And of course, that's not the issue at all. It's really very, very misleading. The Catholic Church and Catholic institutions and other religious people and people of conscience who object to having anything to do with abortion, contraception, and sterilization and offering those in their health plans really have a very firm religious objection to this. And of course, freedom of religion is one of the most basic freedoms in our Constitution, in the First Amendment. And it's never been challenged and under attack by the federal government as it is today in this HHS mandate.
Now, with regard to the contraception rule, however, which, you know, with the sterilization, the contraception, these are the terms that really do have the Catholic Church concerned. Do you set those aside and only speak of the religious freedom? Because I do know that you have said that you would repeal the individual mandate as a justified tax. If you do so, what would you replace it with?
I think the way to get good, affordable products and services for American consumers is competition. The free market is what's given us affordable goods and let our economy grow and given access to consumers of all economic levels for all sorts of other things. And I think it would work in education. I think it would work in healthcare. So as a federal legislator, I would say we need to get rid of Obamacare and this big central planning government model where government controls everything and open up the insurance market so that insurance can be sold across state lines. I think every American should have a great choice in healthcare plans, just like my opponent, Senator Gillibrand, does as a federal government employee.
Okay, let's move on. I want to talk to you with regard to marriage, family life, which is another very important topic to the Catholic Church. The U.S. Supreme Court, new terms, we're looking at another headline term. Among the decisions expected, same-sex marriage. What is your position on that?
I am a firm believer in traditional marriage. I support traditional marriage. If I were a state legislator, which is the level at which these things should be decided, I would vote in favor of traditional marriage. And it's not because I believe that we should tell adults how to live their lives. It's because of my concern for children and the family. And I think every child ought to have a chance at having a mother and a father. And marriage is not an institution that humans invented. The family is something that was ordained by God. And the natural family has a mother and a father because that's the best environment in which to raise children. So I certainly don't want to tell adults how to live their lives. The Catholic Church believes in free will for adults, but it's a matter of how we define a family and what's best for children.
You've said that it is a federal issue, and I understand that U.S. senators do so have a say in these issues, especially if there's some level of constitutional violation. What would be your input on the issue were you to even be able to make any changes in terms of the same-sex marriage law in New York State?
Well, again, I'm running for a federal office, so I wouldn't be a state legislator. I wouldn't be able to vote on that. I think the big threat now is at the federal level. I think that a lot of people want to push through an interpretation of the Constitution that says it's a constitutional right. And that would trample on the right of people to decide for themselves in their own states what type of marriage laws they want. And of course, I think the Church is appropriately at the forefront of those battles within the states because the Church has a great history and a really defined role in protecting the institution of marriage, protecting the family, and protecting children.
Now, we will continue our talk with Wendy Long tomorrow. The campaign for incumbent Senator Kirsten Gillibrand has not yet responded to our interview requests. Father Brian Jordan is running not for office, but for interfaith understanding, and he's running literally in the New York City Marathon. Father Jordan is part of the ministry at St. Francis College in Brooklyn Heights. When he runs next month, it'll be his 62nd and last marathon. As he told the college's television operation, he's running to raise money for interfaith scholarships and much more.
I'm running because of wonderful young people, the academic faculty, the staff. They just show what God's revelation of love is shown here in this wonderful institution of learning.
The marathon will be run on November 4th, and currents will continue after the break. Missionaries in Brooklyn, young people who have done the most to help. Next. Welcome back. Deep concern now for the fate of 3 Catholic priests in the Congo. They were kidnapped by 10 gunmen who tied them up and led them away. More than a year ago, the director of the local hospital was kidnapped. Nothing has ever been heard from him or his kidnappers. In Spain, a Catholic school was raided by a gang of 100 people shouting that they wanted to burn priests at the stake. One teacher was injured in the attack before the mob left. While proclaiming the word of God throughout the world is often the work of missionaries, as the church honored them yesterday during World Mission Sunday in Brooklyn, praise was also given to the young people who helped them.
We today pay tribute to the priests, sisters, deacons, and lay people whom we call our missionaries.
Today we're here at St. James Cathedral Basilica to celebrate World Mission Sunday, a day when we pay tribute to the missionaries throughout the world who are proclaiming the Word of God, who are bringing God's message of love to peoples everywhere.
We invite representatives of parishes and schools who have been very generous in their contributions and work for the missions.
It's who we are. It's the church. It's Jesus Christ. Go out into the world and teach all nations. And we're continuing that mission. So it's the missions, or the mission is the mission of Christ, bringing Christ to the world.
How special it is that we celebrate World Mission Sunday during the Year of Faith. Isn't it the objective of the Year of Faith to help all of us to fall more in love with Jesus and then to put that love into charitable deeds?
Well, we encourage our parishioners in all the parishes and all the students in the religious education programs and in the Catholic schools and academies to support the missionaries, because they can't actually go to the missions themselves, but by their prayers and their sacrifices, their donations, they enable the missionaries to continue the great work that they're doing.
I think it helps us to continue in hope and encouragement so that we can continue the difficult work, especially in raising money for the missions. Not an easy job. And to get young people involved in it, it's an inspiration, I believe, to them.
And we come together to celebrate that unique call that each of us has by our baptism to be mission-minded, to be mindful of the work that the great men and women do in the name of the Church in different countries and at great sacrifice.
We're praying for those people that are not here. We're praying for all of those people out in the world doing God's work. I think maybe it can encourage them too, that they're all part of this, every baptized person.
It felt really nice to go up there and receive it. It's always something honorable to get something for your school and represent your school because, you know, it's meaningful.
It's important to celebrate all the missions, the church, and the diocese, because that's what keeps the church running, that's what spreads the love of Jesus, and that's what keeps all the Catholic schools that I go to and all my friends go to running strong throughout the years.
I hope that many other people will be inspired by what we do, and that they also have the courage to donate to those who are less fortunate than we are.
I hope they get a renewed sense of the great work that the missionaries do, and that they feel that they've participated in helping them to do their work.
We continue with more currents after the break. Letters of Love and Why Satan Fears Him. 2 stories about Pope John Paul II. Next. Welcome back. The chief exorcist of Rome is saying that Satan fears Blessed John Paul II. Father Gabriel Amor says that during exorcisms, when he's asked a demon, "Why are you so scared of John Paul II?" he's received 2 responses. Quote, "Because he disrupted my plans and because he pulled so many young people from my hands." Now, this is a day of celebration for John Paul, as we learn from Rome Reports.
On October 22nd, the Catholic Church celebrates the feast day of Blessed John Paul II. To mark the occasion, thousands of letters that were sent to the Pope during the last months of his life are being shown at the Museum of Love Letters in Torre Vecchia, which is about 125 miles from Rome. These letters tell a story of love and purity. They also have great spiritual beauty because in these letters, the face of John Paul II is recognized as the face of Jesus. Roughly 18,000 letters that were sent to the Polish Pope are part of the exhibit. It's a way to show just how many people from all walks of life admired and were affected by John Paul II. They represent all the colors of the world, all the colors that come together in St. Peter's Square. Some letters are written in Braille, some come from the Islamic world and from people of other religions. There are even some where we don't recognize the language. There are all types of letters, some long, others quite short, but still they highlight just how many people were moved by the Pope and his suffering during the last moments of his life. What moved me most was a letter of a 17-year-old teenager whose family is related to the Camorra family, which runs the mafia in the city of Naples. He asked for forgiveness for all the murders and pain his father has caused. The museum opened its doors on October 16th. It's a special day that commemorates the day John Paul II was elected Pope back in 1978. The letters will now be part of a permanent exhibit.
And with that, we thank you for joining us. Be sure to be here on Tuesday for a celebration of Polish heritage in our diocese. That's Tuesday night right here on Currents. Until then, visit us online at currentsny.net. Tonight, we leave you with more from World Mission Sunday. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching and have a good night.